Today's video is brought to you by Figurama Collectors. From the same team that worked on the concept art for the Attack on Titan Devilman and Bleach statue, they bring to you a statue of Vampire Hunter D. Now, Figurama Collectors was very generous in sending me the Ichigo versus Ulquiorra statue, and when I tell you these things are on an entire different level of quality, I absolutely mean it, and the same goes for this statue right here. It comes with a multitude of swappables for the face and arms, and it even has two die-cast metal swords, his elegant longsword in his right hand, and a second longsword which could be attached to his back as the reins are held. And another really cool thing about these statues, on top of the immense quality, is Figurama Collectors worked closely with Yoshitaka Amano to earn his stamp of approval, so his signature will be featured under each base. Pre-order for these statues will be available on September 3rd at 10 p.m. JST, but these statues have the tendency to sell in less than 24 hours. Sometimes they sell within the first hour, completely sell out. And if you use the discount code on screen, you'll be able to get $25 off on your purchase. So if you are interested, make sure you check out the link in the description below, and thanks again to Figurama Collectors for sponsoring this video. On this channel, I've covered series that have had out-of-pocket moments. I've covered other series that are just out-of-pocket. When it comes to this series, I feel like you can't be out of pocket if there aren't pockets or pants there to begin with. If you didn't know by the thumbnail, we're talking about Prison School. Prison School is, well, Prison School is a comedy series with the artwork of a god. Seriously, I haven't seen a series with such great artwork for something so stupid. And the story follows our main character Kiyoshi and his four friends, Gakuto, Reiji, Shingo, and then you also have Joe, who wears like this hoodie. You never see his face throughout the entire series. And so they think, as the losers that they are, although I say losers endearingly because they're our losers, they decide to go peep on the girls' changing room, which goes horribly wrong when they get caught, and then they're sent to prison in the school, hence the name Prison School, and they are being watched over by the student council. And also, I need to mention the main character, Kiyoshi, he has a crush and he wants to go out with a girl named Chiyo, which we'll get to her in a bit. And the predicament is that Kiyoshi, he wants to go out with Chiyo, and he's gonna have to find a way to escape the prison school in order to be able to go out with his date. But the thing is they only have so many chances, and if they mess up 3 times, they will get expelled. However, now is where we need to go to the student council. First, we have Mari, who's the daughter of the principal of the school, the guy who's running the whole school. And the first impression you really get of her is she's not a big fan of men, but you end up finding out that's because her father, he is down bad. But essentially, she's extremely determined to get Kiyoshi and his friends kicked out. And so you sort of follow their adventures of this student council trying to get them kicked out and them trying to stay in the school and then eventually be free of their sentence. But you see, that sounds neat and all, but now we need to address the comedy in this series. Personally, I think Prison School is hilarious. It has some very, very, very funny moments, but it's also incredibly wild. Like, I think the author's goal, if he had a checklist, was also to explore and show almost every fetish in the book, because this is when we need to get into the other members of the student council, because you have Mari, but then you also have Meiko, who's sort of the poster girl of the series, if you will. If you've ever seen like the white hair chick with the absolutely ginormous personality, so she's the textbook dominatrix. Like, this is one of those series where you're gonna either find out a lot about yourself, or it's going to confirm things you already knew. And since we're on the topic of Meiko, I don't know. I only saw some clips of the anime, none with her yet, because, you know, I'm a good Christian boy. But the author is an absolute monster when it comes to upward angle shots, for no reason at all. Like, the dude I'm just telling you, if you want to study a manga for artwork, especially when it comes to perspective, angles, Prison School. And so now we get into the next character, Hana. And she part of Prison School's humor is misunderstanding humor, right? Although when it comes to her character in specific, this misunderstanding leads to a very interesting dynamic with our main character Kiyoshi, where how do I explain this one? R. Kelly. I won't go any further for now. But the series, in terms of its actual comedy, I think it's very, very funny. At least for me personally. I know humor is subjective. I mean, well, all of this is in the first place. But I think Prison School really hits. And when you're following the adventure of the boys trying to get out of the prison and all the things that they go through, especially Gakuto, he's the MVP of the series. I think he's a great example of just adding a little quirk with his dialogue and the way that he talks being funny. Just, absolutely amazing. And that goes on for around the first 80 chapters of the series until something ends up happening where they expose the student council for trying to get them expelled. So then now the student council is thrown into the prison school, and now the new antagonists of the series pop up. So you can kind of divide Prison School into that first and second half. Now the series is around 277 chapters, and I'm going to be honest, I felt Prison School was at its strongest comedy-wise in its first 100 chapters, although it had plenty of moments later on in the series that were still very, very funny. I felt and even though it had this from the beginning, I felt like later on in the series, it leaned on even more and more and more into just pure hentai, I think. I don't know if that's fair, though. Maybe it's just having to constantly up what was done before. That way it doesn't become stale. Or simply one just becomes used to the humor of Prison School, so then you start to pick up on certain things a little more. Although don't get me wrong, like it's still extremely down bad in the beginning. Just later on, it really goes off the rails. But I think the story does a really good job during that early and middle portion of the story to really get me invested with the characters. And that's important because eventually we're going to talk about the ending of the series. But overall, I felt like I was really intrigued with how things were going to go, especially once the girls were now thrown into the prison school themselves. And it was going to be interesting to see how they would be in this scenario, as well how Kiyoshi would do in this entire thing as well, as he's still trying to be with Chiyo. But Chiyo is the younger sister of Mari, the president of the student council, who's now in the prison school. Hence why he goes in there to get her out. Also, we end up finding out that the reason the prison school was built was because the principal needed to lock himself up. That's how down bad he was. And while Kiyoshi is now inside of the prison school once again, he's going to need the help of his boys. However, part of the issue is Reiji is now in a relationship with one of the new student council members, who is doing her absolute best to satisfy his inner Chainsaw Man fan. That's how I'll word it. Yeah, that's how I'll word it. And in the second half of the manga, I'm not gonna lie, I felt like Kiyoshi being so apart from the boys for a good amount of it just sort of took away from the comedy dynamic that I really loved about the series in the first place. But I think it's also what allowed the series to sort of take a different direction that kept it feeling a bit fresh. And let me just say this, if it wasn't made clear before, don't expect sophisticated humor entering this. This is one of those dumb funny series that either you watch by yourself and die of laughter, or you watch with the homies to have a good time just because of how dumb it is. Character motivations are very silly. It's all very, very silly, all right? But it's enjoyable. You can have fun reading it. I would also suggest the anime because some scenes I did rewatch in the anime and it was way funnier. So I'm probably going to end up rewatching it in the anime, which is going to be the first in a very long time. But now is when I kind of want to talk about the ending because I imagine those that have read the full series, you might be a little curious as to what I think about it. Now, I personally, and again, I don't say this as an insult, it's just sort of my mentality with this series. I did not really take this series seriously in the sense of not that I don't think it's good or that I don't value what's being done there. It's just, for me, it's one of those pure, dumb, fun series that I just enjoy reading. However, the but in this is I can't deny that despite how dumb it is, quote unquote, it still did get me very invested in the characters and in the outcomes, whether or not Kiyoshi would end up with Chiyo, or if he would end up with somebody else in the series who he had developed feelings for, who has developed feelings for him, as well as seeing the other guys grow and end up in relationships, despite the fact that none of them thought they would ever even be close to that. So I think a lot of the other characters ended off in ways that I really liked with their conclusions and sort of how things ended up going. I felt satisfied with that. But now we get into Kiyoshi and Chiyo. So I see this two ways. One, like I said, I see Prison School for its comedy. And part of its comedy, and I think one of the things that's really great about its comedy is how unexpected it is. Whatever you expect to happen ends up not happening at all. And it's one of those things where it works in the beginning of the series, but I feel like when it comes to the ending, whether or not you find that final chapter funny or not, I think is going to greatly impact how you view the ending of the series. Personally, I thought it was a little silly. I thought it was a bit dumb. I thought it was a bit humorous, but it wasn't funny enough to overcome the feeling of, wow, that's it. Because in the ending, it completely throws away everything the main character had been struggling for in the whole series. And even though I'm not as enraged about it, I think that's probably just due to the fact that I only read the series in like 1 to 2 days. It's a very quick read, but I can imagine what it must have felt like for people who followed that series for years. And so from that perspective, I can totally understand people being very upset at that ending, just sort of having everything that was really like the whole point of the series just kind of thrown away a little bit. But at least when it came to all the other characters, I was really satisfied with that. And I think it would have been better if then we would have seen more of a conclusion, if you will, right? Because it sort of felt like we reached the climax, and then that was it. It was the climax and the ending, and then we didn't really get the resolution stage where we had seen Kyoshi maybe with somebody else. We just sort of see Chiyo turn over this new leaf, and then bam, that's it. But thinking about it a little more, the Chiyo page might be a little more infuriating considering the fact that they still have to go to that school for like 3 more years. And so that means that if she is completely out to get them, just like her older sister was at the beginning of the series, then that just means we're all the way back to square one again. But I had fun with the series. I was glad that I read it, but the ending the ending ain't really it. So this has been The Masked Man. Hope everyone has a blessed rest of the day, and peace.